So with National Signing Day being done, I wanted to take a look at winners and losers of not only National Signing Day, but the entire recruiting process as a whole. And before we do, y'all, as always, you know the drill. I want y'all to jump down into the comments and let me know which programs both impressed you and disappointed you. Outside of the obvious answer of Alabama, who we will be talking about briefly, who were you most impressed with? Which recruit were you the happiest with? I can't wait to hear from y'all. If you're already here, y'all, go ahead and subscribe to the channel as we're on our push to 2,000 subscribers, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. If you enjoyed the video, like I said, drop down in the comments and let's talk about what happened yesterday. So, not hiding behind anything, Alabama won. Overall, they signed the greatest recruiting class of all time. Now, we're only going to talk about this just briefly because I talked about yesterday in an instant reaction to the class, just very briefly, some integral parts of it. And after this video, stick around because I'll be taking a more in-depth look at the Crimson Tide class, but to just give perspective onto how absurd this class is. The Crimson Tide got 7 5-stars. The Big Ten as a whole right now has 8. Now, JT Tuimoloau is still out there, and we'll see what his decision is. It looks to come down between Ohio State and Alabama, and we're going to be covering that as it goes. Like I said, #1 overall class in the history of recruiting, and it goes so much further than that, right? They checked every single box. It's one of the most complete classes I've ever seen, if not the most complete class I've ever seen. And aside from being the greatest recruiting class of all time, it also contained the greatest offensive line class of all time, so you have to like that. Another winner on the day, to me, was Michigan. Now, Michigan is coming off of a whole lot of losing, right? If we're talking the entirety of the 2020 season, they would be considered a team that lost the off seasons. However, I can comfortably put them here because they were able to crack into the top 10, which was huge for Jim Harbaugh. That was absolutely necessary for him to gain some sort of traction and momentum heading into next season. Harbaugh has been on shaky ground for a while, and look, Ohio State fans, make no mistake about it, even though I think Michigan was one of the winners yesterday, it's still Ohio State's world, and everybody else is just paying rent to Ryan Day and the Buckeyes in the Big Ten. Even though this is a big deal for Michigan, and it's something that's big for Jim Harbaugh, it doesn't change the inevitability that is the Big Ten right now, and that it is Ohio State's world. And speaking of Ohio State, it is incredibly impressive, and I just want to take some time to really acknowledge what a recruiting class they've put together as well. I've always talked about throughout this whole process how incredibly stellar Alabama and Ohio State's recruiting classes were, and one of the things I always stressed is I don't think people are really taking the time to take a really good deep breath in and look at this objectively. If you're an Alabama fan and if you're an Ohio State fan, I really want you seriously to try this. Look at this objectively and then look at your class. And it makes it just something that you're excited about transitions into something that is absolutely awe-inspiring at what y'all were able to achieve in a COVID year. And I'm not relegating it just to the Buckeyes and the Crimson Tide, but they had far and away the best recruiting classes in the nation, so they get the lion's share of the praise here. It's so incredible, and the reason I wanted to preface what I'm about to say with that is on a day where you didn't make any noise, Ohio State, and in fact, the noise you made was losing one of the best recruits in the nation, Rayshawn Davis, to USC, you're still undoubtedly one of the winners in the whole process because of who you retain, because of the stellar recruiting class you put together, and because of the astronomical quarterback depth you have to like where Ohio State is. And as I said, as much as teams in the Big Ten had decent signing days, it's still Ohio State's conference and everybody else is just paying rent. Another team that didn't make many splashes yesterday, and actually is part of the reason I wanted to talk about the entirety of the recruiting process as opposed to just one day, is Oklahoma. Now, the Oklahoma Sooners got knocked out of the top 10 recruiting classes yesterday, and if we were just talking strictly about National Signing Day, they could be considered on the losing spectrum, still putting together an incredible class. Y'all have to realize that OU's ranking right now in recruiting is incredibly deceiving for a few reasons. First off, it's a very small class, and the quality of the recruits they have is incredible. Second off, because they knew that they were going to be taking a small class, and because I think when they realized they were really going to miss out on Kamar Wheaton back in December, the focus completely shifted to trying to own the transfer market, and they have. right? If we were to add in the transfers into OU's class, it would boost them to an average recruit rating of 93.35, which would be 4th best in the nation. Remember, Alabama has a 95. They're still leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in that regard except for Ohio State. But Oklahoma, without making much noise, is able to finish the offseason making a ton of noise, signing the #1 overall quarterback, an incredible plethora of talent behind Caleb Williams, and then just massively boosting your team in the transfer department. Now, transfers aren't going to win you championships, but when you are as close as OU is to building something very complete, transfers are going to be a huge addition. A team we just talked about. I'm going to package this one. USC and Oregon, both winners on the day. Both maintaining top 10 classes, and it's kind of becoming a revolving pattern of something we've been talking about in the pack for quite some time, that these two teams are really starting to separate themselves from everybody else and really look to this year watching the separation. Now, I can't wait to see the quarterback battle that's going to ensue at Oregon because I have Ty Thompson possibly winning it. Now let's get to the other side. Now let's talk about some losers. And I don't have many, but I do have a few. My first loser is Auburn. Auburn finished with the 30th ranked recruiting class in the nation. And look, while I completely understand that it is not on the new coaching staff to completely right the wrongs of the former coaching staff and all of the shakeup that's happened there and their inability to recruit this offseason, it's still not a good look to be that low when your biggest rival just broke the record for the greatest class of all time, and that's the measuring stick in the SEC. Right, wrong, or indifferent, and I'll give you a hint, it's wrong. The measuring stick for a coach's success and longevity in the SEC is their ability to beat Alabama. And if you can't do that, you're not going to last, and that has just been the proven truth. Auburn loses pretty big on the day because you have a lot of teams in the SEC that were able to really boost themselves. Just in the top 10 alone, you have Georgia, Bama, LSU, A&M up there. It becomes very hard for Auburn to be able to solidify themselves in that situation. My next big loser is Penn State, and this one to me is big. Penn State finished 6th in the Big Ten in recruiting. Now, while that might not seem like the biggest deal, I also want to add in that this is a big deal because the gap between Ohio State and everybody else is just widening. Even with Michigan's class, that gap is widening because of the depth at talent at which Ohio State is accruing right now. Nobody else is even coming close to that within the conference. The only conferences that are doing it is OU with their ability to raid the transfer market right now. They have depth right now, and then some SEC teams and Clemson. But not only is Ohio State getting leaps and bounds better, Penn State, but teams like Maryland, Michigan, Wisconsin, all of those teams, Maryland, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio State, all signed a 5-star within the Big Ten. Penn State didn't sign any. Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Maryland all finished above Penn State in recruiting. And while I think that if we're talking quality of coaches, Penn State's coach is up there with the best of them, I've been very adamant on this channel that Maryland is building something that could be scary, and when you're not beating them in recruiting, that's really going to have Maryland try to climb the ladder within the Big Ten. Once again, the Big Ten is Ohio State's world. Everybody else is just living in it, but that sort of reality is only further entrenched when you see Penn State dropping the ball to the degree they did in this recruiting class. Maryland, I'm high on. But Maryland does not have the allure that Penn State does. Or at least they shouldn't have, and maybe I'm a bit off in my prediction of Maryland. Maybe recruits are higher on them by a few years than I am, but that to me is only going to hurt Penn State in the long run, but I can't wait to hear from y'all. Drop in the comments down below and let me know what you think. As I said, y'all, drop a like on the video and subscribe. That's it. See ya.